Welcome back to the Real Housewife of Alaska podcast. Thank you for joining me on this journey as I go from corporate dropout to finding my path of health and happiness in the raw lands of Alaska, where I retreat from cultural standards into a more simple life. Hopefully, you were able to listen to our first podcast that talked about the Genesis story and a lot of the motivations that caused me to sell everything we had in Washington and leave our jobs and move to Alaska and decide to build our own home with our own two hands um, in a very rural spot. And here we started to find happiness we didn't even know to hope for. And as we got deeper into that lifestyle, we realized how much more of it we wanted. So, of course, what would any sane person do who just spent several years as a labor of love building the home around them, the gardens around them, the lifestyle around them, on our 2 acres, and by 10 acres that's even more remote, where we are going to develop a 100% off-grid self-sustainable farm. And so thank you again for joining us on this journey today. What I want to talk about is my autoimmune and chronic pain and illnesses. And you might be thinking, what does that have to do with living in Alaska or finding a more simpler life? And I'm going to tell you, it has everything to do with it. And I'm going to tell you how I healed. And at the end, there's not going to be a subscribe button. There's no cringy TikTok dances. There's no nothing. It's just me telling you what I did to discover my illness and then how I started to heal my illness. And I do because I hope that it helps. The best place to start, of course, is at the beginning. And so I'm going to start when my autoimmune disease started. Now, I don't know at the time I have an autoimmune disease when it starts. I don't know for nearly 40 years later. It takes me a while to trace back the beginning of the chronic illness that I've lived my entire life with. And it starts when I'm 9 years old. And it's actually a very happy, wonderful time in my life. My family, my mother, my father, my sister, and I lived in the middle of the woods in this little community of about 20 other families, completely off grid. It was like a work construction site on the island of Prince of Wales in Alaska. And so this was about 37 years ago. I'm 46 years today. I've seen 46 winters. And we're healthy and happy and we're living off the land. There's no stores. There's a town, Thorn Bay, which is about 30 miles away on an old dirt road riddled with potholes. We would go there occasionally, but for the most part we grew all our own food, we hunted, we fished, we lived off the land. My mom homeschooled us. It was the best education I ever received. It was fantastic. And my dad, even though most of the people in this community that was just in the middle of the woods um, brought like travel trailers to live in, my dad built this little 2-story cabin. It was heated by this old wood stove that heated the cabin and how we cooked. And so every morning, my chore was to go out and cut and haul in all the wood that we would need to cook and stay warm for the day. My sister and I were wild. There were a couple of other kids in the camp. We were the only girls. And we played out in the woods all day long. We played out in the muskeg. We lived the best childhood. Of course, the internet's not invented at this time, so there's no TV, there's no radio, there's nothing but us in the wilderness. I can't think of a better childhood. And because there's not a lot of outlets, and because we're a close community, we would often go and visit other community members, in this little town. It's like a carved out piece of forest where 20 of us have set up shop. And one night we are at our closest community member, and this man, when I was 10 years old, attacks me, and for nefarious reasons. But I kick and punch and scream and scratch, and I get away. But I know from this very moment I can't tell my parents. And this is my 9, 10 year old brain processing this. I can't tell my parents because I know exactly what they're going to do, and this body's going to end up in the woods, and my parents are going to go to jail. So I can't tell them. Now, of course, this is not the right thing to do looking back as an adult, but as a child, this is how I'm processing it. But I have a sister who's just a year younger than I. And so I tell my sister, never go back there without me. Never. You have to promise me. And she's 8. She said, no, of course, I won't go back there without you. And so I spend the next year and a half, um, protecting my sister and going back to this person's house because I don't want to tell anyone what happened, but I don't want my sister to be alone with them. And so, being who I am today, I know now this is when my autoimmune kicked up, because your autoimmune is you just constantly in this fight and flight, no rest and digest. It is hypervigilance. And so as you can picture, as like a 9 or 10 year old, being hyper vigilant about the dangers around me and my family. Very, very shortly after me being attacked by our neighbor, do I develop psoriasis. Now, again, I'm in the middle of the woods. We're eating off the land. We're not eating any mass produced food. And at the time, of course, it's Alaska, so you don't have a lot of doctors. The doctors say, well, I must have too high cholesterol, which of course is not why people get psoriasis. But I spend from the age of 10 to about 25 breaking in and out of psoriasis. The other thing that happens to me is pretty much right after that, I go from a very normal sized child to a very overweight child. And my battle of being overweight really starts from there until I realize the the way I need to eat and the lifestyle changes I need to make. So, um yeah, the rest of my family was very slender. And I just kind of got bigger and bigger and bigger. And really, no matter how healthy I thought that I was the rest of my life, um, I couldn't control my weight. And again, we would spend all afternoon hiking and playing and running and biking and eating nothing but venison and salmon and bear and snap peas, for the love of God. So many snap peas is like the only thing that would grow where we lived. Um, and so that's where my autoimmune starts. Also, from that point on, I never remember a life without migraines. Now I still get migraines today, but they're very, very controllable. My migraines used to put me in the hospital frequently. In fact, I remember one time driving and my migraine is so bad and I'm vomiting all over myself. I'm vomiting and I'm in Washington, and of course I'm in traffic, and I vomited all over the dashboard. I vomited all over me, and I start contemplating, if I drive my car into the guardrail, like not super fast, but maybe like 30 miles an hour, I'll get knocked out. And when I wake up, they will have put me on some sort of pain meds, because that's how painful migraines, at least these migraines, were. Just absolutely debilitating. There were many times in life when I was going to college where I would, almost fail a class because I couldn't I couldn't think, or times where I, almost got fired because I couldn't go to work. And so I go to doctors over and over and over again trying to figure out why I'm getting these migraines. And this is in my 20s when I really start pursuing an answer. And so I really just get till I get all these, CTs and blood work. And if this sounds familiar to you, if you are like me and you've lived a life with chronic pain, or you're developing these symptoms, and now you're maybe going to the doctor and you're getting your blood work done, and they're saying, "Oh, there's nothing wrong with you. Your blood work's just fine." This story is for you. So they tell me you get migraines because you get migraines. Thanks a lot for nothing. So I really every single day of my life was based around waking up and figuring out how to not get a migraine or figure out how to live with a migraine that I had. And that's just how I lived my life. And people go through lots of things. That was my normal. That was my normal. I didn't know anything outside of it. In By the time I got to my mid 30s, I had injury after injury after injury. I'd had so many surgeries, and it really started clicking to me. Everything was connected. I I had probably somewhere around 20 surgeries at that point to repair joints, knees, shoulders, wrists, ankles, feet, um, weird nodule um, tumors had like grown on my thyroid, so they had to remove that. Just all these things. By the time I was in my mid 30s, I was like, I know this is connected. I know there's something wrong with me. But you go to a neurologist for your migraines, and you go to an endocrinologist for your thyroid, and you go to your family doctor for your aches and pains and your fatigue that you can't shake, and no one talks to each other. And so I started going to doctors saying, "Hey, I know that all these symptoms are connected." At this point, too, this might be familiar for you. I have horrible digestive issues. I'll spare you the details, but horrible digestive issues. And I'm like, I know it's all connected. I know it is. And so, and I keep getting these injuries I shouldn't get. Like I paint a wall, and my poor elbow, I would be in so much pain. For a year I couldn't pick anything up just because I had painted a wall. And I was a fairly healthy person. I worked out a lot. I thought that I ate healthy food. Um, but the symptoms just got um worse and worse. And of course, blood work would come back and it would be normal, it'd be normal. And then I had my one and only COVID vaccine. And my autoimmune went gangbusters. At this point, it is a struggle for me to get out of bed. I have no strength in my muscles, no strength in my brain. I can't think. I couldn't do anything. I couldn't participate in life. I was just this glob, constantly in pain, gaining weight, constantly injured, unable to think, talk. I was at risk of losing everything. I I kept pressing on though, and I knew somehow I was going to find what the hell was wrong with me. So I finally found a functional doctor. Now, here in Alaska, pickings are slim. I don't have a lot of specialists to go to, but by the grace of the universe, this doctor said, it sounds like you have an autoimmune disease. And they for the first time ever, a doctor tests my autoimmune antibodies, and I test positive for ANA and RMP. And so if you have had an autoimmune test that might sound familiar to you, the result, like the equal sign, is you have mixed connective tissue autoimmune disease. And so I had an answer, I had a direction. I had at this point, too many too many symptoms to even list off. It was crazy. But I'm going to list off a few of them because this might sound familiar to you and you might have a aha moment. The chronic fatigue. I mean, just absolute impossibility to get from the bed to the couch. And even by the time I got there, my muscles would hurt so bad. I would be so exhausted just from taking a couple of steps. The absolute brain fog, could not think. My joints hurt. Every little thing caused an injury in me. I was nonstop sick. Migraines, of course, all the time. Um, I had POTS. So if you like stand up and you get dizzy and you're like, ugh, and that happens to you all the time, you probably have POTS as well. And so essentially what happens is your sympathetic nervous system isn't regulating itself. And so when you stand up, usually your blood pressure would rise and fall with your movement. And for me, it didn't do that. And I say it didn't because that's one of the many symptoms that I've healed. So once I had my autoimmune diagnose, I dove right in. I'm a professional project manager. I am very familiar with research, and I started logging everything. I started logging every reaction, every food that I ate. I started reading every book I could, and and so this is where I'm going to get to the story of why it matters and why we're doing what we're doing. Because I healed from changing my food and changing my lifestyle. So I was always the type of like extreme person to like, I would work out twice a day in the gym and lift super, super heavy weights. And I would hike, 10, 12 miles. I would snowshoe. I would get up first thing and just start running around doing chores, doing activities, doing events. I never stopped. I was just constantly go, 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 go because I wanted to be a productive person. And I knew at any moment I could be taken down by a flare up of my pain and exhaustion. And I would just work myself into the ground, work myself into an injury. Okay. So if this sounds like you, I also want to acknowledge that if you do get an autoimmune test and it comes back negative, that doesn't mean you are not experiencing autoimmune systems. Okay. So um, don't think that just because it came back negative that this approach or following an autoimmune protocol isn't going to help you. It will. It will. So if you ever heard of Andy Frisella, I'm a huge fan of him. He doesn't know who I am. I'm not, plugging him for anything. It took me 4 times to do 75 hard before I actually did it. So I failed 3 times in a row. Bam, 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 failed 3 times. And then on the fourth try, I completed a 75 hard challenge. It was awesome. And of course that was like the extremist in me. And it was before I had my, autoimmune, because it is pretty extreme. Um, and so after I had my autoimmune diagnosis and after I started doing just like months of research and reading all these books and watching all these webinars, it clicked to me. And Andy, if this ever crosses your path, you might want to plug yours. I know you might be sad about this. Because I call my what I do, I call it in my head 75 soft. Because the elements of Andy Frisella's 75 hard protocol challenge is a great way to live. And so essentially it's, follow a diet every day and don't have any cheat days. Don't drink any alcohol. I haven't touched alcohol in over 2 years. That is a great place to start if you can. If you're like, man, give or take alcohol, give it away, get rid of it. That's a great place to start. Okay. The other part of 75 hard is to work out twice a day. Now, and one time outdoors. So this is where kind of like the 75 hard, my 75 soft comes in. Is I say, be active twice a day. Be active. And if you have an autoimmune, you want to stay away from extreme activities. So when I lift weights now, I do it 3, maybe 4 times a week. I stick with like a middle weight, something that is, not super light and not, I got some muscle tone. I can see through my shirt. but you can still lift like a medium size weight and still put on some muscle as a woman. I liked, and then go outside, get some sunlight, get some fresh air, go for a walk, commune with nature, touch a branch, touch a tree, put your feet in grass, go outside. Part of the protocol is to read 10 pages every night. That is something that would improve you, and I say just read 10 pages of anything that makes you happy. It really helps slow your brain down. It If you can meditate, that's fantastic. It doesn't necessarily have to be reading, but take that time where it's just you and some silence and some calmness, and that's probably going to be the hardest for some people. um Drink water. I have my homemade tea here. Wild chamomile grows all over my property, and so does something else called pineapple weed. I love them, and so I just gather them and dry them and put them in a little tea dispenser and make my own tea. I do drink, and they help. That does help my migraines. I do drink a cup of coffee, but you got to stay away from the caffeine. The caffeine, we're all over caffeinated. Um, I would say once you level out. So my 75 soft. You want to follow an AIP diet, so an autoimmune protocol diet. This is not an easy diet to follow. This is very difficult in this day and age, but this is what is going to change your life. And if you follow this diet, if you make this your lifestyle, when it's, over time, your injuries will heal, your brain fog will go away, your chronic pain will start to improve. So if I were to come full circle, after a couple of months of eating on an AIP diet, an autoimmune protocol diet, I could feel, I mean, the weight didn't just fall off. I'm not going to say that, but 2-3 pounds a month just started coming off, and it would come off, and it would come off. And I eat very high fat. Right now I'm 145 pounds and 5'7" at 46 years old. And my weight has really, kind of stayed here, and it feels very healthy, and it feels very sturdy. Like I can eat these foods, and I haven't lost so much weight that I'm just, you know, I feel like I still look like it would be hard to push me over. I still look sturdy. And I feel, like a strong person. One of the best parts you can add to a protocol is bone broth. In fact, right now I have my bones smoking. I go to a butcher and I just buy bones and, follow a bone broth. So start there. Look into the autoimmune protocol, but it is no grain, no gluten, no eggs, no dairy. Like I said, this isn't easy to do. Some people do it for 30 days. Some people do it for 6 months. If you read Dr. Wall's protocol, WAHL, she says that you need to do this protocol for a minimum of 6 months to be like, to really heal yourself. And one of the things you have to think about when you are having these autoimmune symptoms is this isn't just about healing your current symptoms. It's about preventing the future symptoms you could be having, which is certainly something I've experienced, and I still get new symptoms crop up. So that still happens. I'm not 100% healed, but I am 100% compliant to the diet, which is more my lifestyle. And so it's what led us here is to get to a place where we can grow our own food, where we can hunt and fish for our meat, where we can have that simple, quiet lifestyle and say, you know what, I don't care what society's standards are. Um, I I don't want to wear makeup. There's nothing wrong with makeup, but I don't want to wear it. And so here I am, living that more simple life. And that's what brings us to today, and our goals, and why we really want to press on and build this place where we can gain back the knowledge of being self-sustaining, and not eating processed food, and not being drained by whatever is on TV, by being able to plug back into nature, to be able to go outside and play as a kid again, to have energy. And hopefully, we'll be able to pass down these skills to our children, to our grandchildren, and so on and so forth. There are these life skills that have been lost in just a generation or two. We don't know how to sew clothes. We don't know how to grow food. We don't know how to preserve food. We don't know how to hunt. We don't know how to fish. These skills are diminishing, and our illnesses are increasing. Now, there's a big difference between causation and correlation. And oftentimes people put, I think, the wrong emphasis on data to make it sound like causation instead of correlation. But I postulate, I pontificate that this go, go, go life, this constant mind numbing feed that we get from TV and social media and society telling us exactly how we're supposed to be, and the doom scrolling and the processed food and the lack of time in nature is the causation for this increase in our chronic illnesses. If my story sounds like yours, I hope that you can find some relief in your symptoms. I hope you don't feel sorry for me. I hope you don't pity my story at all. Remember, strong people are forged in a fire. They're not coddled like a fragile egg. My whole life story has made me a very strong person. And I love every moment of my life, even when I am having to crawl and dig out of a dark, deep, autoimmune, painful flare up. I still love that I am on this path and becoming such a strong, resilient person, and so independent from anything other than my happiness, my family, and my health. I hope you enjoyed today's podcast, and that you'll return for more stories of the Real Housewife of Alaska and how we live out here and our adventures. Thank you for sharing it with me.